here with a video for the winning agenda about Flesh and Blood, the card game. Recently had a chat with Stephen Woolley from Team Covenant about this brand new card game. Well, it's not brand new, it's been out for a couple of years now, but it's brand new for us, and it's something we haven't done content about before. And for those of you who are new to our channel, the sort of content that we've created in the past has generally been about competitive gaming, particularly focusing on strategy and the more, I guess, deck building and tournaments and sort of that side of card games as well. So I know that currently there are a lot of videos out there about cracking packs and box openings and the market value of cards in Flesh and Blood and that sort of thing. And recently I jumped on the Flesh and Blood subreddit and noticed that there was, seemed to be a lot of need for or desire for more content about deck building and strategy and gameplay. And certainly as someone who's been getting into the game recently and learning a bit more about it, I've noticed that there aren't quite so many videos about, certainly on YouTube, about deck building and about the sort of gameplay side of Flesh and Blood, which is really what I'm passionate about. It's what got me interested. And it's a conversation that I'd like to see more about and happening a bit more often. I'll be heading down to the Calling in Melbourne, Australia. So we're lucky enough here with Flesh and Blood being based out of New Zealand, quite close to home for us, that one of the two Calling events that's happening in June is going to be in my hometown of Melbourne. So I'm really excited about that. It's a sealed event, so it'll be Monarch sealed. And in preparation for that, what I've been doing is putting together kind of just gauntlet 40 card Blitz decks of each of the Monarch heroes, so that I can get more familiar with their mechanics, what makes them tick, using some of the first edition cards that I was lucky enough to get my hands on a small quantity of, as well as the basic Blitz decks. So what I kind of did was I took a box of first edition cards that I opened, boosters. But obviously, if you've got unlimited boosters, that'll work just as well. In fact, even better because it'll be cheaper. And then I got each of the Blitz decks that they've released, which you can still get for sort of MSRP pretty much everywhere. The supply of those has been really fantastic. And I basically just took the Blitz deck and augmented it with a few rares, majestics, extra commons, just a few tweaks here and there. And played through a few games and tried to develop the decks. So what I'm presenting to you here today at the start of this series is Chane, which is probably the one that I've played the most with. And in turn, I'll go through kind of an example deck building on the Blitz decks for some or hopefully all of the other heroes, depending on whether people enjoy this video and the sort of feedback that we receive. So the Chane deck that I put together here, I'll talk through each of the cards and kind of how they function and how I've found them performing in a little more detail. But first, to give a bit of an overview about what the hero is trying to do. So Chane's ability says, I'll get Chane here so I can read it out to you clearly, and I'll also have the card up on screen there for you. So once per turn, you create a Soul Shackle token. Your next Runeblade or Shadow action card this turn gains Go Again, and this action itself has Go Again. So it doesn't take your action point for the turn. It creates a Soul Shackle token, which is an aura. There are some cards in the game that care about auras, so that can be important. Your next Runeblade or Shadow action, of which Chane is, of course, themselves a Shadow Runeblade hero. So that means that they can play any cards that are Runeblade cards. They can also play any cards that are from the Shadow talent. So there are some cards that are a Shadow action or a Shadow attack action in the deck. And the Shadow talent that Chane has is what enables those cards to be included in the deck. There are also some cards that are Runeblade cards, Runeblade defense reactions or Runeblade actions, and the reason those cards can be in the deck is because Chane is a Runeblade hero. Chane is also a young hero, which enables the play of the Mentor card, which is also in the deck and which comes in the Blitz decks. So being a young hero and this being a Blitz deck, it has to be exactly 40 cards for the main deck. And then you have an equipment sideboard of equipment cards, which can be more than just the basic slots of a weapon, a headpiece, a chest piece, gloves, and feet. You can have, can't remember the exact numbers, I'm going to have to correct this later, but you can have greater than that number of equipment cards, and you can sub some in and out as part of the Blitz deck rules. So what you get in the Blitz deck that you can purchase for Chane is a range of commons, a few rares, just a couple of choice select rares, and a mentor card as a majestic, which is also included in the deck, as well as some equipment, which is made up of commons and rares. The deck that I've put together here has, as I said, subbed in some additional cards, which are helpful to expanding upon Chane's gameplay. But at a basic level, what Chane's ability asks of you is that you play a lot of Runeblade and Shadow Runeblade cards, so that you can actually get that go again. That the Soul Shackle, that gaining the Soul Shackle enables you to get from Chane's ability. In addition to getting that go again, you want to be able to actually utilize the cards that the Soul Shackle banishes from the top of your deck. So you'll notice as we go through the cards that there are a range of attack actions and non-attack action cards that you can play from your banish zone. So the downside of Chane's ability is that you are going to run through your deck very quickly. Because the Soul Shackles stack, so the more you accumulate, the more cards you are going to be banishing from the top of your deck each turn. As you accumulate those, once you're banishing 5 or 6 cards from the top of your 40 card deck every turn, in addition to drawing up your 4 cards per turn, you do the maths and you realize that you kind of run out of turns pretty quickly at that point. Once you're going through sort of 7, 8, 9 cards a turn, if you're taking a Soul Shackle every turn, you're going to start doing that from sort of turn 3 onwards. You're going to run out of cards pretty quickly. Yes, you're going to be pitching some cards, which, as we know in Flesh and Blood, means that when you pitch the card, it's put on the bottom of your deck at the end of turn. So you don't have exactly 40 cards that you go through in the game. You go through some again because you pitch them to the bottom of your deck. But still, once you're going through 9, 10, 11 cards a turn between your card draw, naturally, if 4 new cards every turn, plus the cards you're banishing to your Soul Shackles, you run out of cards quite quickly. So what you need to be able to do is actually utilize those cards you're banishing to the Soul Shackles, and put together turns that will overwhelm your opponent's defenses. So that if they try and block out, if they're playing quite a defensive deck and they've got, say, an average of 3s in their hand to block with, so say 12 block each turn, you need to be dishing out well in excess of 12 to be able to reduce their life total in those key turns to win the game. So what enables you to do that, as I said earlier, is the cards that you can play from the banish zone. So there are both attack actions and non-attack actions that you can play from the banish zone. Chane's ability gives you 1 go again by taking the Soul Shackle. But really, if you're banishing 5 or 6 cards to the banish zone from Soul Shackles on those later key turns, you want to be able to both have the resources to play 5 or 6 cards from the banish zone, which means having a few blue pitch and yellow pitch cards in the deck. But you also want to be able to have enough go-agains so that if you do banish 3 or 4 attack actions on one of those turns, because the cards you're banishing from the top of your deck are, of course, random until you get right through to the end when you have some control over what you've pitched at the start of the game, and therefore what's going to be banished on the final couple of turns, perhaps. If there are multiple attack actions banished on one of those key turns, you want to have enough go-agains so that you can play them all out of the banish zone. Because, of course, the other mechanic that these cards have, the ones that are playable from the banish zone, is they have a thing called Blood Debt. And this ability says, at the beginning of your end phase, so after your action phase is finished, if this card is in your banish zone, you lose 1 life. So if you don't manage to clear out your banish zone every turn, as an example, Shadow of Ursa is a majestic in this deck. It's a blue pitch, 0 cost attack action, and it says you may play Shadow of Ursa from your banish zone. As an additional cost to play Shadow of Ursa, you may banish a card with Blood Debt from your hand. If you do, it gains go again, as in the Shadow of Ursa gains go again, and it itself has Blood Debt. It attacks for 2 and it defends for 3. So Shadow of Ursa is a really good one because it costs 0. It's an attack action. It can gain go again by banishing something from your hand, which if it has to have Blood Debt to give it go again, to give the Shadow of Ursa go again. And if you banish a card that you can then play from your banish zone, you're not really losing that from your hand. Of course, the challenge being that you will have to get that other card that you banished that has Blood Debt out of your banish zone as well in that same turn. So you sort of run into this issue where if you don't have enough cards like Shadow of Ursa that can gain go again, or enough ways to give cards go again, then you may, or cards that aren't actions. So things like there's an instant in the deck called Invert Existence, which has blood debt and can be played from the banished zone. It does cost a resource, so you need that, but you don't need an action point. So making sure that you've got a balance of things like Invert Existence, like Shadow of Ursa, both of which pitch for 3, so they're fantastic to have early in the game because you can pitch them for resources, put them safely on the bottom of your deck, where they're very likely to get banished in the late game. And then in the late game, you can play them without spending an action point on one of those key turns. So Shadow of Ursa and Invert Existence, both Majestics, so a little harder to get your hands on perhaps, but they are examples of the cards that really take the Chane deck to the next level because they enable you to, on those key turns, play more cards quite cheaply. Invert Existence costs 1, Shadow Ursa costs 0, quite cheaply and without taking up your action for the turn. There are a few other choices of cards that I've included in the deck, so we'll go through, I guess, in order by card type. So I'll post a link to the list as well, so you can have the list up as well, and you can look at that as I'm talking through the list. But going through it by card type, so we'll do the attack actions and then the non-attack actions and then the other cards after that. So the attack actions that you can play from the banished zone cost 0, 1, or 2 to play, and it's important to remember that if you, on those key turns later in the game, if you think about how many resources you're going to have available, assuming that you've got kind of the balance of resources that I've got in this list or something quite similar, you do have a few blues, you've got a few yellows, but you do need some of those reds as well, particularly on the cards that you're wanting to play from your banished zone. Things like Red Seeds of Agony, which we'll come to a little later, but also for the attack actions, things like Red Bounding Demigon and Red Riftbind, to actually enable you to push through damage on those key turns. Because not only can you kind of try and go wide on those turns or play all the cards out of your banished zone, which is great, you also want to be getting impactful enough plays that you're overwhelming their defenses and reducing their life total sufficiently to win the game, to kill them. So Riftbind is a good example of one that can help with that. So Riftbind is a one cost attack action. The blue attacks for 1, the yellow attacks for 2, the red attacks for 3. And it says you may play Riftbind from your banished zone. If you do, it gains +X attack, where X is the number of non-attack actions you have played this turn. So you can play, and it's got blood debt. So you can play it from your banished zone. It attacks for 1, 2, or 3, depending on whether it's red, yellow, or blue. And it gets buffed depending on the number of non-attack actions you've played this turn. So when we go a little later to the non-attack action section of the deck, you can kind of think about on those later turns, when you've pitched your Riftbinds early in the game, put them to the bottom of your deck, and then on those final couple of turns you're banishing them, Riftbinds, along with all these other cards. What are the non-attack actions that are going to enable you to attack with the biggest Riftbinds for the best value? So there's an obvious synergy there between Riftbind and the non-attack actions that either grant go again or other bonuses, but which don't take up your action point. You've then got a 0 cost attack called Bounding Demigon, which has a little bit more of a restriction. So Riftbind, you can play, the last card we talked about, you can play from your banished zone regardless of what else you've done on that turn. Obviously you want to play it after you've played non-attack actions because you want to get a bonus from it, but in a pinch, you can play it even if you've played no other non-attack actions, and it will just attack for its base attack value. Bounding Demigon, however, says you may play Bounding Demigon from your banished zone only if you've played a non-attack action card this turn, so it's a little more restrictive. But it does cost 0, which is fantastic, because it means that you can clear it out of your banished zone with fewer cards in your hand because you need fewer resources on that turn, and you can use your resources to pay for the non-attack actions that then enable you to play the Bounding Demigon. So the blue attacks for 1, the yellow attacks for 2, and the red attacks for 3. And it says if you've played an attack action card this turn, you may play Bounding Demigon from your banished zone, and if you do, it gains +1 strength. So that it's basically a 0. The blue basically becomes a 0 for 2, the yellow is 0 for 3, and the red is 0 for 4, which is not too bad as a rate of return, given firstly that you're able to play it from your banished zone, which is a huge bonus because it can be played alongside a range of other cards, more than you would normally be able to with a card that you must play from your hand. but also it's can be given go again naturally by Chane's ability. So you've got a lot more flexibility, and Bounding Demagon is sort of one of the core cards in this deck that really makes it hum. Then you've got Unhallowed Rites, which has the same restriction as Bounding Demagon, in that you can only play it from your banished zone if you've played a non-attack action card this turn. The blue attacks for 2, the yellow attacks for 3, and the red attacks for 4. And it says you may play, if you've played a non-attack action card this turn, you may play Unhallowed Rites from your banished zone. You may put a non-attack action card with Blood Debt from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck. So remember earlier in the video I was talking about how important it is to pitch in the right order with Chane, and to make sure that on those later turns you've got the right mix of cards stacked on the bottom of your deck, so that when you do a big banish at the start of your turn of 6 cards or so, you're hitting cards that you are going to be able to clear out. You've had some control over what's in that section of your deck, so that when you banish those cards, you can have that really big turn. Unhallowed Rites doesn't require a hit for its effect to work, so the put a card on the bottom of your deck happens regardless of whether the attack hits or not. And the non-attack action card that enables you to put on the bottom can be quite impactful. There are Seeds of Agony is the main one, but there's also Howl from Beyond and Seeping Shadows, which are 2 other non-attack actions that we'll come to in a moment that you can play from the banished zone. So putting one of those on the bottom of your deck from your graveyard can be really great, and that also means that you have a bit more flexibility. Having that in the deck means you have a bit more flexibility to, for example, actually play your red Seeds of Agony early in the game and still have them go on the bottom, rather than needing to be inefficient and pitch the red Seeds of Agony early in the hope that you're going to banish them later. You can actually play them, buff one of your attack actions, or trigger your Bounding Demigons, or do whatever else you want to do, and then still use the Unhallowed Rites to put them on the bottom later. So that I've found to be, it can be a bit iffy because it's a bit of a weaker one of the attack actions, and it doesn't really help you get heaps of damage in, because its base stats aren't great. It does block for 3, which is good, and the ability to recycle cards is one that can be quite crucial in Chane, particularly in some matchups. Soul Reaping is the next attack action, and this is a legendary Chane specialization. So both of the Shadow heroes in Monarch have a rare specialization that's actually legendary, so you can only have one of them in your deck. It's a rare rarity, so it's quite easy to get in packs, but it's legendary in the sense that you can only play one. The reason I think that they've done that is that the Shadow heroes also have a legendary rarity specialization, which itself is legendary, like every other legendary, in the sense that you can only have one in your deck. So I think they've done that to balance the fact that other heroes in the set have a rare specialization that you can play 2 of, the light heroes, and the Shadow heroes have essentially 2 legendary specializations. One is a rare rarity card, but you can only play one of them in your deck, so that you don't have basically extra specializations in your deck. I assume that's why they've done it, but anyway. Soul Reaping you can only have one of in your deck is the point there. So what Soul Reaping says is it costs 6, it attacks for 6, and it's got 3 defense, but crucially you don't actually have to pay 6 to play it. It says you may banish 1 or more cards from your hand rather than pay Soul Reaping's resource cost. If you do, gain a resource for each card with Blood Debt banished this way. While Soul Reaping is attacking a hero with 1 or more cards in their soul, it has go again. So if you're playing against a light hero, it's really strong. If they've got a card in their soul, getting a 6 power attack that has go again, fantastic. If you're not playing against a light hero, which is going to be a significant portion of the time, or a light hero with a card in their soul, what it basically is a free 6 power attack action, which you can give go again with your Chane ability or something else. And in fact, it's a bit better than free, because you can banish a card, say an Unhallowed Rites or a Bounding Demagon or a Riftbind, all of which cost 0 or 1 resources, or a Shadow of Ursa, which I mentioned earlier, and you can then gain a resource for banishing it. Banishing it pays for Soul Reaping, and then you can use the resource that you generated to pay for itself, if it's an Unhallowed Rites or a Riftbind. Or even one of the 2-cost attack action cards, or even a non-attack action card with Blood Debt. If you banish it, you can use the resource that you gain for banishing it to help pay for it. It's also worth noting that you can banish one or more cards from your hand, and you gain resources for each card with blood debt that's banished. So if you banish a Unhallowed Rites, a Riftbind, and a Bounding Demagon from your hand, when you play Soul Reaping, you gain 3 resources for banishing 3 cards, and to actually play them out of your banish zone only costs you 2, because the Riftbind and the Unhallowed Rites cost 1 each, and the Bounding Demagon is free. So Soul Reaping lets you set up some pretty amazing turns to be extremely resource efficient, which may, for example, let you defend with more cards on your opponent's turn. If you've got the Soul Reaping in Arsenal, you might be able to defend with 2 cards and still have a pretty big turn. Or alternatively, it just lets you, set things up and pay for a range of things from your hand more cheaply. So Soul Reaping is a good one. You've then got Rip Through Reality and Rifted Torment as the other 2 attack actions. So Rip Through Reality is a 2-cost attack action. The blue attacks for 3, blue attacks for 2, yellow attacks for 3, red attacks for 4. You can play it from your banish zone, and if you've dealt arcane damage to the opposing hero, it gets Go Again. So Rip Through Reality is a really interesting one. Like, its stats aren't great. A red being a 2 for 4 with Go Again, like, it's a bit below rate. But especially since the Go Again can be quite difficult to trigger in terms of sequencing. So I often find with Rip Through Reality that it sounds better than it is, because sequencing it so that you can play it from your banish zone to turn on your Galaxy Black, for example, to then be better with its attack is a bit awkward, because you want to be dealing arcane damage with something like Galaxy Black before you play the Rip Through Reality. So it creates some awkward sequencing issues, but if you do have on one of your later turns, it also costs 2, which is important, because that does, the more 2-cost cards you have in your banish zone on your big blood debt turns, the more resources you need and the more difficult it is for you to actually play them all. It synergizes extremely well with Invert Existence, being a 1-cost instant that can threaten arcane damage. But I guess the other problem with Rip Through Reality is if your opponent's got any arcane barrier equipment, which a lot of heroes will be packing in their equipment sideboard and they will have available, being the sort of the null rune equipment that lets them pay resources to prevent arcane damage, it can actually be quite hard to land the Rip Through Reality. And if you've got the Rip Through Reality sitting there on the board in your banish zone, your opponent is going to know that arcane damage prevention is at a premium, and they're going to be more likely, given that's public information, that there's a Rip Through Reality sitting there that you're about to play. They're more likely to pay resources into their arcane barriers rather than just taking the 1 arcane damage on that turn. So I have found Rip Through Reality sort of a little bit more of an underperformer, and it may be one to come out, but it's certainly the Go Again has the potential to make those big turns work. It's just about whether you can actually get that Go Again often enough. Rifted Torment is another one. So that's a 2-cost attack action. The blue attacks for 3, yellow attacks for 4, red attacks for 5. And it says, blue attacks for 2, yellow attacks for 3, red attacks for 4. So the same stats as Rip Through Reality. But rather than gaining Go Again if you've dealt an arcane damage, it says if you play it from your banish zone, deal 1 arcane damage to a target hero. So obviously there's a synergy there between Rifted Torment and Rip Through Reality, in the same way as there is between Invert Existence and Rip Through Reality. These are multiple ways you have, plus Galaxy Black, to actually deal arcane damage to the opponent to turn on Rip Through Reality's Go Again. But Rifted Torment is, again, a below rate attack. The 1 arcane damage is quite easily prevented by arcane barrier equipment, particularly when it's all public information and they're all sitting there in the banish zone. The 2 resource cost as well is, just like with Rip Through Reality, quite expensive, and it means that if you've got those 2 cards sitting in your banish zone, plus say a Howl from Beyond, which also costs 2 and is a non-attack action that we'll come to in a moment, it can turn into quite an expensive turn. Like, that's 2 blues you need to have in your hand just to pay for those 3 cards. But if you can do that, and then say you've got a Bounding Demagon and one of the other 1-cost attack actions as well to follow that up with, or perhaps something else in your hand to give you another Go Again, it can turn into quite a good turn. So Rifted Torment is there. At the moment, I'm only playing blues in the deck because I'm finding it to be like the arcane damage itself is the most important part of the card, and the red is actually quite below rate for a red. So I'd rather just have it in there as a resource that I can pitch early. And then on one of those later turns, I'm threatening that arcane damage to give me a bit more flexibility. I think if I did cut more Rip Through Realities, I would probably cut the Rifted Torments as well. Perhaps to play more Bounding Demigons and more Riftbinds, because at the moment I'm playing kind of a mix of blues and reds of most of these cards. So if I wanted to move to, say, 6 Bounding Demigons and put in the yellows, which I think is probably right, then I might cut the Rifted Torments. So that's the attack actions. As you can see there's a range ranging from 0 to 2 cost. They're not particularly efficient attacks. Rip Through Reality has the ability to gain Go Again, as does Shadow of Ursa, as does Soul Reaping, if you're attacking a light hero with a card in their soul. But the others, being Riftbind, Bounding Demagon, Unhallowed Rites, and Rifted Torment, all don't have Go Again. So you need to either, through Chane's ability or another card in your deck, give them Go Again if you're going to be able to go one after the other and clear them all out of your banish zone. So that's where the non-attack actions come in handy. So one of the non-attack actions that I have in the deck is actually a generic from the Monarch set, and it's called Captain's Call. The red, they all cost 0, they all defend for 2, and the red says choose one. The next attack action card with cost 2 or less you play this turn gains +2 strength, or the next attack action card with cost 2 or less you play this turn gains Go Again, and it has Go Again. So this non-attack action card can trigger, if you play it, for 0, it can trigger your Bounding Demigons and your Unhallowed Rites, because it's a non-attack action card that you've played the turn, so you can then play them from your banish zone. It can also give them Go Again. So it's a 0 cost card that you have in your hand that can allow you to basically play an additional card out of your banish zone. I'm playing the reds because the yellow and the blue, I'm playing 2 reds and a yellow. The yellow and the blue, rather than giving less of a buff if you choose the plus strength option rather than the Go Again, they instead only apply to attack action cards with resource cost 1 for the yellow and 0 for the blue. So they're basically just more restrictive in the attack action cards that they can apply the Go Again or the strength buff to. I'd rather have the reds in the deck, since they aren't cards I want to be pitching for resources, because I don't want them on the bottom of my deck, because I don't want them to get banished later because they don't have blood debt. I want to play them in the first few turns, or have one in Arsenal for one of my big turns, and therefore I want them to be as flexible as they can be rather than being resources. So that's what they are. It's also worth noting too, as we go through, that I have deliberately got a few cards in the deck that are either super crucial to the game plan of having those big turns, or just really efficient and good and useful in the deck, that don't have blood debt. Because if every card in your deck has blood debt, then on those turns later, once you've scaled up to 5 and 6 Soul Shackles, you are just going to be hitting 100% blood debt cards. And at the moment, I'm not convinced that that's exactly what you want. I mean, there's an argument to say that that is what you want, because then you can kind of control exactly how many cards you're going to be drawing into your blood debt zone every turn that are going to be playable. But at the moment, I'm finding that you just do want to sometimes miss on those banishes, so that there are fewer potentially damaging cards in your blood debt zone on those key turns, but also so that you actually have access to these effects, because to include more blood debt cards means including more Rifted Torments, more Rip Through Realities, and more Howl from Beyonds and things that cost 2, and I'm just not sure that you really want to be doing that. I think you want to keep your resource cost curve really low, as low as possible, whilst having a reasonable number of blood debt cards, but also a reasonable number of things that give you Go Again, and are non-attack actions. So in that vein, there's a Majestic in the set called Shadow Puppetry, which is a shadow action. So because Chane is a Shadow Runeblade, Chane can play it. It's a red strip, so it pitches for 1. It's got 2 defense, and it's 0 resources to play. It says the next attack action card you play this turn gains +1 strength, Go Again, and if this attack hits, look at the top card of your deck, you may banish it. So this works extremely well in Chane. when the top card of your deck is most likely to be a Blood Debt card that you can then play. So it's sort of like draw a card if it hits. This itself gives the next thing go again, and it gives it a small strength buff. So Shadow Puppetry functions quite like a red Captain's Call. It doesn't have the restriction of what the cost of the attack action that it's giving the go again to is, so it can give go again to anything. And it also gives the strength buff and the potential to draw a card. So it's just like a better version of Captain's Call. At the moment, I've only got one of them, but when I get another one, I will certainly be slotting that into the deck because it's fantastic. So Captain's Call and Shadow Puppetry sort of fulfill that same role. Then you've got the Blood Debt cards that are non-attack actions. There's Howl from Beyond that costs 2 to play. The red defense for 2. And it says you may play Howl from Beyond from your banished zone. It's got Blood Debt. And it says the next attack action card you play this turn gains +3 strength. Go again. The yellow adds +2 strength and the blue adds +1 strength. So at the moment, I'm playing 5 of those because having non-attack action cards that you can play from your banished zone is really important for playing your Bounding Demigons and playing your Unhallowed Rites. It is expensive though, and it costs 2. So that's something I'm certainly playing around with and thinking about what the right number to play is. Seeds of Agony is the next one. Seeds of Agony costs 0. And much like Captain's Call, the red, the yellow, and the blue scale according to the cost of the attack action card that they're buffing, rather than providing more of a buff. So they all provide the same buff, which is the next attack action card you play gains deal 1 arcane damage to target hero. They have Blood Debt. You can play them from the banished zone, and they have go again. They defend for 2. The red one buffs attack action cards with cost 2 or less. The yellow one buffs attack action cards with cost 1 or less. And the blue buffs attack action cards with cost 0 or less. So pitching the blue one early for resources is okay, because it can buff your Bounding Demigons on those key turns. But the yellow and the red you do want to get on those key turns because they can buff anything. Then again, Seeds of Agony is like a free play from the banished zone on those turns. So even if you play it and it doesn't actually give the arcane damage directly to the next attack action you play, because you play a 0 and the next action, you play a blue and the next attack action card you play costs 1, so the blue doesn't actually trigger. The one cost attack action you play might be a Riftbind, and Riftbind actually does get buffed anyway by non-attack action cards you've played this turn. So there's already a bit more synergy there, and Seeds of Agony, therefore, because it costs 0, it has go again, and it's a non-attack action card, so it buffs Riftbind, and it triggers Bounding Demagon and Unhallowed Rites in allowing you to play them that turn. It has sort of a really crucial role in this deck. So Seeds of Agony is one card that I'm playing all 6 of at the moment. And I should say, I mean, I meant to say this at the outset, the numbers and the exact card choices in this deck are extremely experimental. As I said, I've just been building on the Blitz decks that you get in the box with the cards that I was lucky enough to open. And so there is certainly some room to improve and augment this. But you know, I want to give people a sense of what I've found in the first few games I've played to be the most crucial cards and some of the better synergies. So that's Seeds of Agony, really crucial card. Then I've got a couple of other non-attack actions like Dimensional Crossroads, which is another Majestic that I'm not sure if I'll still include. It doesn't have Blood Debt, but it can provide you a little bit more damage on some of those key turns. It's a 2 cost, 3 defense, yellow strip card, pitches for 2. It's an action aura, Shadow Runeblade action aura with go again. Whenever you play an action card or a non-attack action card from your banished zone, if you haven't played another card of that type this turn, deal 1 arcane damage to target hero. So the first attack action and the first non-attack action you play each turn, ping your opponent for 1. It's pretty great. And it doesn't go away until you take damage on your turn, or until you lose life on your turn. The easiest way, obviously, to lose life on your turn is to Blood Debt. So if you can avoid Blood Debt, then you're doing really well. But you can also, obviously, take damage from your opponent's defense reactions or instants on your turn. So an opponent's Invert Existence, if you're playing the mirror match against another Runeblade, could deal you damage on your turn, but also Reckless Swing in Brute, Steelblade Shunt in Warrior, as some commonly played examples, but also some other defense reactions might deal you damage on your turn. So you do have to watch out for those because they'll kill your Dimensional Crossroads. The other cards, I've pretty much mentioned them all. I'm playing just the one of red reduced to rune chant because I like having a defense reaction in the deck, and sometimes that works out well against an opponent's dominate attack. It's really just in there because sometimes it's fun to have the one outer and just have it when they don't expect you to. The other card which has been really cool in Chane particularly is Art of War from Arcane Rising. I've only got one of them, so I've only got one in the deck, but if I had two, I would play them both. It's a yellow pitch, so pitches for 2, costs 1. It's a generic instant. It says choose 2. Attack action cards you control gain +1 strength and +1 defense this turn. The next attack action card you play this turn gains go again. Until end of turn, you may defend with attack action cards from arsenal, or you may banish an attack action card from your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. So with this, you can choose to give your next attack action go again. You can banish an attack action from your hand that has blood debt, and then draw 2 cards. All for 1 resource. Like, that is an amazing card in Chane. So that's one that, if you can pick it up, I know Arcane Rising can be a little harder to come by depending on where you are in the world, but if you can pick 1 or 2 of those up and chuck them in the deck, on those big turns, it just gives you so much more gas. Lets you really break the chains, break the shackles, so to speak. Lord Sutcliffe is the other one. Of all the mentors, it has a bit more of an effect while it's sitting in your arsenal. So I'll read you the mentor ability. So you can only have it in your deck if your hero is young, which this is because it's a Blitz deck. At the start of your turn, if it's face down in your arsenal, you may turn it face up. Whenever you play a non-attack action card, deal 1 arcane damage to each hero and put a lesson counter on Sutcliffe for each damage dealt this way. Then if there are 3 or more lesson counters on Sutcliffe, banish it, search your deck for a specialization card, put it face up in your arsenal, and shuffle your deck. So at the moment, I've only got a Soul Reaping, but once I get an Eclipse, I'll put the Eclipse in the deck, and then I'll have 2 specializations that the Sutcliffe can tutor for, put face up in my arsenal. But along the way, for each non-attack action card that I'm playing, yes, it pings you as well, but pinging your opponent for 1 incidentally with that arcane damage can be really helpful to trigger your Rip Through Realities as well. So it gives you just that extra card in your deck that gives you kind of some incidental arcane damage here and there, which can be cool. And the Reduced to Rune Chant also obviously has that benefit too, along with the Grasp of the Arknight, which I've got in the glove slot. To sometimes, look, you don't often have the resources spare to make a Rune Chant, but if you do, on those key turns when you're threatening the Rip Through Reality, it can force your opponent to use their Arcane Barrier equipment at the very least, and if they don't have that, or they're out of resources to do it, it can trigger quite cheaply and quite easily your go again on the Rip Through Reality. So that's a very quick and, well, didn't turn out to be that quick. We're 40 minutes in, but that's a run through of this Chane Blitz deck. I hope that that's been kind of useful for you. I hope it's been interesting, and if you enjoyed the video, comment, let me know. Let me know if you're enjoying Flesh and Blood content. Let me know what sort of stuff you'd like to see in terms of strategy and other content for the game. I've got a warrior and brute, shadow brute deck, Blitz deck built up, so I'm considering also doing a similar video going through those decks. If that's something that'd be of interest to you, let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video as well. There'll be more Flesh and Blood and of course more other content, be it Twilight Struggle or Android Netrunner or all the other games that we love at the Winning Agenda, coming out on the channel. I guess the other thing to mention before we go is the Galaxy Black, which is the weapon I've touched on earlier, and some of the other equipment. Grasp of the Arknight, Ebon Fold, which can, allow you to basically get an extra card on one of those key turns. Snapdragon Scalers, which can give you another go again on a key turn as well. And then you've got the options for the Nebula Blade and the Dread Scythe, which I haven't found to be as useful as the Galaxy Black, but some people like the consistency that the Nebula Blade can provide you. In this particular build, though, I think Galaxy Black is the way to go. And I realize I've referred to it, but I haven't actually read it out. So I'll do that quickly before we go. So it's a two-handed Shadow Runeblade weapon, a sword. It's got a once per turn action red attack, resource rather, attack. If you've played a card from your banished zone this turn, it gains +2 until end of turn. And if it hits a hero, deal 1 arcane damage to that hero. So it's got that obvious synergy with Chane and the Shadow Runeblade cards that let you play cards from the banished zone. It becomes a 1 for 3 that threatens to be a 1 for 4. The fact that it can be blocked with a 3 defense card, though, is it doesn't always feel great. But it's just another thing that contributes, particularly earlier in the game when you're only banishing 1 or 2 cards with Blood Debt. You can threaten, and force them to at least block with a card from their hand or whittle away at their life total a little bit. So, yeah, it is a decent weapon. So anyway, that does actually bring us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and as I said, do let me know if you're enjoying the content and if you'd like